Miss Corey Rae. How are you today?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I think it's so great to have you on. I consider myself super progressive. I was a classically trained dancer. I was around so many different types of people, gay, straight, whatever. Like none of that ever bothered me. But I think there was always this mystery. I never had that much exposure to any trans people or the trans community. And I think with anything, there's always this, it's a lack of knowledge or a lack of education. So, bear with me. I'm sure I'll make mistakes. And that's why I'm so happy to have you with me to kind of guide me through the process. And I would just love to hear, what are your thoughts on feminism and what does it mean to be a woman?
Oh, that's an interesting question. My thoughts on feminism, here for it, love it. I think everyone should be a feminist. I think it has a really negative connotation in the sense of, oh, feminists are men haters, and I could, in a sense, understand where the mass public gets that stigma from, maybe from film and TV and what they thought over the years and hard-hitting feminists back in the day. But I mean, modern day take on feminism should be anyone who believes that women are equal and should have equal rights and equal pay and are equal human beings. That's a feminist.
Yeah, right. And I think that's the misnomer is that people don't realize that it's about equality. It's not about one is better than the other. Or we're here to prove something. It's like we just want to be treated like everybody else.
Yeah, it's not about taking over the man or taking out the man. It's about becoming equal with the man and making sure that everyone sees us as such and treats us as such, and respects us as such. So yeah, and you asked something else about feminism.
I just like no, I meant what is it for you? What does it mean for you to be a woman?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think my idea and the concept of what a woman is has changed over the years. For me, growing up, I saw, you can only become what you really see. And I saw pretty, popular, blonde, rich, and people who had opportunities. And that's what I thought being a woman was. Obviously, vagina and the way you dress and the way you act and talk and walk. And for me, growing up, without having any trans representation in film and TV and out-of-home ad placements, I only saw those girls. And so I became what I saw, which was prom queen. I grew out my blonde hair. I, at one point, took vocal feminization therapy, which I don't use anymore because it's hard and I don't feel like women need to speak or act or talk or walk or dress in any way that people deem as fit, especially specifically trans women. I think we are conditioned that, okay, you know what, we'll accept you, but only if you look like a trans woman and act like a trans woman and walk and talk. I mean, like a woman or quote unquote. And for me, I've never identified as trans, I've identified as a woman. And as I've transitioned, and once I had surgery, it was the day of my 19th birthday, I had this rebirth and my life was able to move forward. And before then, my therapist, and at the time I was living in stealth, which means I didn't disclose to anyone for 5 years, 4 years of college and a year afterward that I was trans. So I transitioned in high school, went off to college, kept it a secret, partied, had boyfriends, the whole 9 yards, had surgery in college. No one ever knew. And if they did, they never heard it from me. So I lived this life of stealth because I had passing privilege and because really out of safety. You hear all about these horror stories of the true traumas and trials and tribulations that trans people go through, and it's horrible. And I wanted to live a quote unquote normal life and be seen for who I was. So for me, a vagina, so to speak, was my version of complete.
Mm-hmm.
And after moving to Los Angeles and coming out through a blog post and that going viral and becoming an activist and becoming someone who works on social media and within the entertainment industry here in Hollywood, I realized that man and woman does not equal penis vagina. Penis and vagina's genitals have nothing to do with who you are. That's a sex organ.
Sure.
But truly, woman means feeling feminine to a point where that's what you want to embody all the time. And I think that's where gender nonconforming and all of that comes in. But for me, it just means being guided by a divine feminine and owning that and identifying as a woman, regardless of where you are in your transition. And if you ever want facial feminization, hormones, surgery, that all shouldn't matter. It should be about feeling. And do we feel masculine? Do we feel feminine? Do we feel like male? Do we feel like female? Do we feel like both? Do we feel like neither? And exploring that.
It really is interesting that obviously there is such a spectrum just of humans in general. So like when you said your story of you coming out, what you originally had thought, and you said obviously your perception of what a woman is evolved because, you know, when you're younger and there is no representation for, you know, whether you're trans, whether you're black, whether you're Asian, whether we don't see those heroes in, you know, reflected in popular culture or movies. That is what you think, that this one very narrow, this very narrow spectrum is what you're supposed to kind of cram yourself into. And we would never ask that. That's the funny thing. We've now, I guess, have stopped asking women to, you know, cram themselves into that. You have to be skinny, you have to be blonde, you have to be, you know, all of these things. And now we are seeing representation of all different shapes, sizes, gender and the such. And that's been, I think, you know, representation, like you said, and you being involved in Hollywood is probably the most important component to show someone who's, you know, in the middle of nowhere, oh, there's somebody out there that looks like me. There's somebody out there that I can emulate or kind of, you know, steer my ship towards to try to become.
Exactly. I think the reason why I fell in love with Hollywood and the entertainment industry was because I saw that the only way to truly influence a generation and on people on a global scale was through screens. Mm-hmm. And that is phone, tablet, TV, and movies. And how, you know, I've made my life about answering the hard-hitting questions that people have about being transgender, because it isn't every single transgender person's job to answer those questions, but I've made that my career. And for me, to make the biggest possible impact that I want to make of having people perceive us and treat us differently and humanizing us has to be on a global scale. And the only way to truly do that is through entertainment, which you start small. For me, it's social media. And then I've worked my way up into writing the screenplay and becoming an actress and getting on those screens. And it's playing roles that are both transgender roles and cisgender roles. I think my niche is really becoming that person who can do either. And it's really not about the story, and it's more about the character and what that character is doing, and not if the actress is trans or not. And that's become extremely important to me, because then it shows people you don't have to be typecast into you're transgender and you're going to be transgender forever. Because right. I was transgender, lived 5 years, no one knew, including my boyfriend, and he treated me like any other woman he would have dated.
Well, so it's funny that I was going to ask you, because obviously there was that whole controversy around Scarlett Johansson. She was supposed to play trans, and there was this whole outrage from the trans community, or just the community. And usually the funny thing is usually it comes from people who aren't even trans, who are usually the loudest. It's like we see this with kind of all these movements. It's it's not even the people who the movement's about per se that have the loudest voices. So it's actually really cool to hear you say, look, everybody should be able to play everything. It should be, do I fit this role? Am I going to be the best character to play this part?
Yeah.
How limiting it is to say, oh, you're trans, you're only going to take trans roles. Well, okay, well, or if you're straight, you can never play gay. It does. I mean,
exactly. It's like just because I'm not a lawyer doesn't mean I can't play a lawyer in a film. But I will say, I understand the Scarlett Johansson controversy only because right now it's so important to hire trans people and give them money and support them. And there's so many costs to being transgender: therapy, hormone treatments, facial feminization if you want that, surgery if you want that, a new closet. I mean, there's so much to pay for it. College, there's so much. And to hire trans people, like that's the point. So I understand for now, like hiring trans people to play trans roles or a gay man to play a gay role, but in the future, and hopefully in the near future, it won't matter as much. And we can get back to actresses playing actresses. For instance, Hilary Swank, won that Oscar for Boys Don't Cry. And that's the movie title, right? Yeah, Boys Don't Cry. And thank God we had her to play that role. Like, thank God there was any actress to take a risk, and writer and all of that. But I think now, especially after watching the documentary Disclosure on Netflix and in the production of the film about my story, it's so important for us to get off of those transitioning stories and the trauma stories, and as crucial as it is for people to truly understand what my community goes through, we have to start sharing our successes. And I think that's what I've tried to do on my social media and in my writing and in my
escape that
modeling
victimhood mentality that because you don't, that's not, I think that's, I don't want to spoil you, but sorry.
Not victimhood, but more so the traumatic stories that are sad. We need to also showcase that trans people can be happy and can be successful and can be loved.
Sure.
Like, that's important. It's not that trans people are victims, because we're victims of horrible crimes and hate speech, but rather than...
I say that, I mean, I don't want it to be viewed as less than. It's because it's all, like you said, it's all about the equality aspect. And you're saying, like, I'm another woman going through the world. We're all humans. We're all messy. We all have, no matter what you come from, a lot of people just have messy backgrounds. We have, I had an alcoholic father, an abusive grandmother. We all have our stories of how we get, and that, how that shaped me being a man. And you have your journey of how you were shaped to being a woman. I think that, your story of your transition is no different than, it shouldn't be looked at as anything different than anybody else coming up and through a struggle of their own, to just equalize everybody.
Exactly. Coming of age, coming into themselves. I often say to trans people who come for advice, I say there's no two people in this world that are the same. So no two transitions are going to be the same. And with social media and the culture that we're in, it's so easy to compare ourselves to others and compete with others, but we just need to be with ourselves. And we're all on our own paths at the right time. Everything works itself out. And so I hope that people can see transgender people as just another type of person that goes through life and has their own journey, and that's how they came to be. Obviously, there's a lot more physical aspects to it, but then you look at other people who came into their own once they got a boob job or once they got a nose job or something like that. Like, I had a vagina job, and it's beautiful, and you would never know that it wasn't a vagina before. Like, technology's amazing and it's worked out. So I'm hoping that one day we can get to that level of like another type of species, another type of gender, not like this other mutated man in a dress type of situation. I mean, I studied the sociology of gender and sexuality in college. It was something I was really interested in because I had already transitioned, I had already had surgery, but I then got to have a knowledge about what it meant to be a society that has gender like roles and categories. And I learned in Amsterdam that the history of transgender people is as old as anyone else. And there's been cavemen and mummies that have been male DNA and female burial styles. And in ancient China, they had their own version of like a third gender, and the Native Americans had two spirits. So it's been around forever, and we've just been ostracized in recent history. And a lot of that actually comes down to the gay liberation movement. There's a wonderful documentary called The Life and Death of Marsha P. Johnson on Netflix, and it talks about how trans people were taken out of the gay liberation movement because gays thought that trans people would hold them back from getting their rights. So it's really in the past couple hundred years that we've been othered. And I think it's about bringing us back into the narrative as just another type of person. And it's totally okay. And if you're not trans, that's fine. But, you have to accept it and see us as humans, because that's at the end of the day what we are.
Yeah, that is the interesting thing, right? It's like male, female, or other. It's like, no, it's you're just a different type of woman, like a black woman to a white woman. And I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that just there are just subtle differences, but you're more the same than you're not at the end of the day.
Totally. And at the end of the day, like, I think like a woman, I walk like a woman, I talk like a woman, that's all great. But like, it's like my soul is a woman, and that's all that should matter.
I feel like there needs to be, especially for parents who, I'm sure parents are the ones who would freak out the most when, if your son decides, that he identifies as being a woman, or vice versa. There's no handbook for this. There's no kind of, maybe this is something that you could help. Obviously you're such an amazing, leader in the community. It's just like, I feel like everyone's going to experience it their own way anyhow, but there's no guidelines of like, it's probably a lot to deal with. It's the same as if your son was coming out or your daughter was coming out, and there's really nothing to kind of codify or say like, hey, like this is what you can expect, or this is how to champion that person to being who they really are. Like, I think that's what we're very poor at, embracing and empathy, and just saying like, okay, I accept you, say you're whoever you are, and I'll accept you for whoever you are. It comes down to the content of your character. If you're a good person or if you're not a good person, it's just that weird rub that I feel like I wish there was a better way to educate people.
Totally. I mean, going back to like not every trans person is the best person in the world. I mean, I'm sure there are some trans people that are terrible. Can I curse?
You can curse. You can say no. I was gonna say there are trans people that are assholes. There are men that are yeah.
And I have been, one of them. I emulated Regina George from Mean Girls in high school, and I became her. And my friends will tell you that, like, they'll be like, "You were the biggest bitch." I mean, of course, I had so much else going on, and I had stopped my male puberty, so like in its tracks. So then I was going through female puberty. I was already 17, 18. Everyone else did it when they were 13, 14. So, I mean, there was a lot going on. But yeah, not every trans person is the best person in the world. And I'm not saying that. But in general, like, we need to be seen as human. And I think going back to the parent thing, a parent's job is to be there for their child and make sure that they're safe and that they, can live up until at least 18 years old, and hopefully you're a great parent further than that. And there isn't one handbook. No, I think as time goes on, there's books like The Transgender Child and things that have come out, and celebrities have written books. And I'm sure Jazz Jennings' mom has written a book, and my mom is writing a book, and I'm writing a book. I mean, everyone writes a book, but like there are tools to help, but there is no one exact guideline to exactly how it should go, because again, no two people are the same. Every case is different. And I think the best thing that parents can do is just listen to your child, and what my mother would say is not parent your child out of fear. Fear for what would happen to them, fear for what everyone's going to say. Like, parent your child like based on what makes them happy. My mom at 2, when I asked her for Cinderella dresses and Barbies, gave them to me without a second thought, because that's what made her kid happy. And if I happened to grow out of it, great. If I didn't, also great. My brother painted his nails, played with Cabbage Patch dolls, cut off my Barbie's hair, and he grew into a complete straight cisgender male. I also played with Barbies, didn't cut off their hair, played with Cabbage Patch dolls, played dress up, and I grew into a trans woman. So it's about parents just letting their child be and expressing themselves. And whether it's a phase or not, fine, let it be a phase. But if it's not, support them and be there for them. And that's all you can really do, and help them get the support that they need.
It is that irony. So I'm a new father. My son just turned 2, and as of course, as a parent, you want to try to protect them as much as you can, but also give them the freedom. I remember being I was in Target, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy my son a doll, just because I wasn't trying to like be so progressive or be so cool, but I was like, if all I'm giving my son is trucks and all I'm giving him is G.I. Joes, like, how are you going to expose anybody to anything else? And it's just that lack of exposure and that lack of knowledge. It's like, oh yeah, boys play with this. It's like, no, children are only given. It's like when people say, my son or daughter, they will only eat, white foods, or you're the one giving it to them. You control, how much screen time your child has. You control what kind of toys your child plays with. So that's on the parents at the end of the day.
100%. How did your kid react to the doll?
Loved it. He picked it up and it's funny that the reason I bought it for him, he was at a play date, and there was like kind of one of those like yoga thingies where like the parents do yoga and the kids are playing around, and he very LA. He started pushing a pink stroller and had a doll in it, and he picked the doll up, and he was just to see, and it was actually for me as a parent seeing, I guess it made me feel like I was doing my job well because I was giving him enough love that he could take that love and transfer it to something else. And he carried that doll around and he was so happy. So the next time we were in the store, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get him a doll. And he loves the doll. And it's funny because now when he approaches babies or puppies or anything like that, he has that sensitivity. He has that kind of nurturing.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's definitely been, it's all a learning experience. But like for me, like, I don't know, like, I guess my next question is kind of, you knew, I guess knew is probably a silly term, but you started to kind of lean the way of recognizing your femininity. And I see there's all these debates of parents giving their children hormone replacement, and that's a very kind of it's a permanent solution in a lot of cases, from what I understand. And you could please correct me if I'm wrong. What should that process look like? I'm so unknowledgeable about this, so I'll take your lead because I don't know. Like, when kids are young, they're impressionable. They don't necessarily know what they want. And some kids want to be an astronaut. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be an astronaut. I'm not trying to compare being an astronaut to sexuality, but it's just there's so much confusion and just growing pains and figuring your life out. Like, what would the steps like that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but for me, it was going and seeing a therapist at the time. I mean, this is like 10 something years ago. But at the time, my therapist we couldn't for years find someone to see a child or a trans teen. But when she saw me and she'd never seen someone my age before, she said, we need to get you on hormone blockers because if you decide to transition, we don't want you going through a full male puberty.
And what age is this? This is before puberty.
15, 16. I was a very late bloomer. I was very little. I didn't grow very much until high school, just a late bloomer in general. So for me, like, I hadn't gotten facial hair yet. I hadn't gotten body hair yet. Like, and at 15, 16, you probably should, but I just didn't, thank God. And she said that the hormone blockers would give me time to make that decision. And I think it is extremely important for trans children who are expressing it to get on those hormone blockers, because if it is a phase, they should know by the time they're ready to go through puberty and or a little bit after puberty. I mean, I think someone has a pretty good sense of self by 15, 16, 17, 18 these days.
Yeah, high school seems like the logical choice, I guess. I mean, I don't. What I guess it's like saying, oh, they should wait till they're an adult, but like, what is that? 18 doesn't really necessarily make you an adult. It's just a very relative term. So
I think people who are adamant about it are the ones who really need it. And hormone blockers are totally reversible. What's not reversible truly is when you start actual hormone, either replacement or hormone therapy, where
I didn't even know there was a distinction between the two. So that's
there's cross hormone therapy, and then there's just hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah, that's the only thing I knew of.
And I'll speak for trans women specifically.
Mm-hmm.
When you start the estrogen, I think your sperm count decreases, and you won't be able to like bank sperm or have your own kids. So for me, at 15 years old, I went and I banked it because I would love to have my own children. So there was that aspect of it, because I knew once I started estrogen, that was something that was going to be really hard to potentially be reversible, but pretty much not. And of course, once you have surgery, there's no going back, really. So there is like the thing of like, obviously you're not going to give your 5-year-old surgery or your 5-year-old estrogen, but the hormone blockers are a great way to gauge whether or not it is a quote unquote phase or something that's really how they identify and they want to go further in life. And I think that's a great way to start. I think anything other than that is a little too serious. I think talking about surgery and anything like that at such a young age, I think it's more so like, what does your kid want to wear to school today? What does your kid want to do when they are in play dates? What does your kid want to do when they come home? Like, I was happy wearing my boy clothes to school and then coming home and putting on my favorite red dress and Barbie heels. Like, I was totally okay with that. We don't need to force, oh, my kid says they like Barbies. Now my kid's a girl and that's what's going to happen. Like, let's just let kids be. Let's let them do what they want. Gender reveals are totally vile. Sorry if you had one for your little boy.
I did not have it. I
Thank
did not
God.
have a gender reveal.
But like, why? Like, your kid is going to tell you what they are. Like, I don't understand why. And gender reveals, it's not like it happened in the 70s and it's a tradition. Like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they started. So like, why do we have them? Why are we like categorizing people so early on in their lives? Like, why do we care? Like, let people be. Like, mind your own business. Worry about wearing a mask and like who's in office and like the environment burning. Like, don't worry about what your kid likes. Like, who cares? You know?
Yeah.
That's my perspective on it.
Sure. I mean, that's I guess that's the thing is really giving, and that's the problem with, you look at parenting in the last, 20, 30 years, our generation essentially is like, has been the nature as the parents are on top of the kids, every decision, whether what they're doing in school, who they're talking to, who their friends are, there needs to be way more freedom given to children to kind of explore and make the mistakes. And like you said, just because your kid's playing with Barbies doesn't mean your child's going to be gay or they're going to be trans or, there's going to be some issue.
No, not at all. I mean, my brother literally loved painting his nails orange and pink. And then he also was watching South Park and making fart jokes. So like, it's just letting your kid do as they please and letting them figure it out for themselves. And as a parent, guiding them and letting them see it through and just being there for them.
So what's your take on the J.K. Rowling whole?
Oh God, oh my God. Sorry, I shouldn't say that's a harsh word, but it's really how I feel about her. I mean, she keeps digging herself into a hole that she wants to be in. I mean, the tweets aren't an isolated issue. She has tweeted numerous, at least 3 times, about her thoughts on gender issues. I hate the word issue, but gender variances. And then, of course, I don't know if you saw this, then her new film is about her new film. It just came out yesterday. Like the press for it is about a cisgender male who's a murderer who dresses up as a woman. It's like, bitch, are you fucking good?
That's the crazy thing. We have a woman who can literally create a fantasy fucking universe and create all these different types of people that don't exist. And she's fine with that, but she can't actually deal with people that really do exist. That's
like, what's her problem? Like, who hurt you? Like, and I know the story is so wonderful. She wrote on the napkin in the coffee shop and she was broke and she had kids and was going through divorce. Like, that's fine. But like, was your husband that left you trans? Like, I don't understand where this is coming from. Like,
what's the threat? Why are there women, obviously the trans exclusionary radical feminists, why is it that they feel threatened by the trans community? Why, if you're a woman and you're all saying we're women in this together, like we kind of talked about before, is every woman has a different struggle of getting to, where they are in womanhood and in life. Why is there the power struggle?
Ignorancy and being uneducated and ego. I think ego stems from, we are brought up learning and knowing one specific thing. When something new is introduced, our ego puts us on defense. We say, I don't know this. This isn't what I have been brought up to believe. Therefore, I'm going to be defensive about it and not accept it right away. And someone who is as rich and powerful and public as J.K. Rowling has to have an ego. I mean, we all do, myself included. Like,
myself included.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I would love to say I'm the most spiritually enlightened and I don't have an ego, that would be a lie. And I think hers is incredibly heightened. She became a female billionaire who people idolize and look up to and compare themselves to. But like, does she not realize the amount of transgender children that saw themselves in Harry Potter and wanted a better life for themselves? I mean, myself specifically, my brother tried reading them to me and every single time I fell asleep. So not for me. But there are so many kids out there who look up to her and are hurt by her. And I just don't understand, like, a woman of that power, like, why are you isolating? I just don't get it. And I think that these feminists that, you know, there's this hashtag now, trans women are women. And like, why do we have this hashtag? Because there are people who, like the gay liberation movement, think that trans people are going to stop women from becoming equal and stop the Republicans, it's not even Republicans, it's like Trumplicans, from giving them their rights and their equality.
I think that's the hardest thing too, is there's enough, I mean, just being in this world, you know, with, you know, men and women and the competition for certain things, and especially in Hollywood, with how narrow the roles are, how few the roles are, you see so much infighting, women cutting down other women. And I just don't, I'm not saying that men don't do that, but it's a very different power structure. And to see women who, when there are so few opportunities to, you know, be undercutting the person next to you to try to, you know, step over them to get that role or to get that thing, to when it should be more of a collective.
Yeah, I think it stems, I mean, there's infighting even within the trans community. And I think what it stems from is us being conditioned to do so. Fighting for the man because men equal security. Fighting for the job because it means independence. Fighting for the skinniest, blondest, fashion forward. I mean, all these things that women have been conditioned to care and think about. We've been pit against each other through the media. And it's unfortunate, and that's where our culture has gone. To relate it to trans women and the infighting there, there's almost like a look when two trans women that I've experienced, when you walk into a room and it's like, I clock you and you clock me, but none of us are going to say anything about the fact that we clock each other, so then we kind of like don't talk to each other. Or it's like, oh my God, like, I've seen you on Instagram, I love you. You know, it's either one or the other. And like, I think that stems from like competition. Am I the most passable? Do I have a relationship that I'm proud of? Am I smaller framed, prettier, better hair? Wow. Yeah.
It's that sense of feeling unique. And I think it's probably, you probably have that where if you're probably used to being in most scenarios, you know, being the only trans person or being around mostly straight people. And so it's like, if you were the only black kid in an all white high school and you're used to that uniqueness, and then someone else comes in and they also share that, you're kind of like, oh, well, now it's this weird power struggle between, am I still special enough? Am I still, you know, then you kind of almost feel like you have to jockey for position to you know, out trans the other trans person.
And I think for me specifically, because I never fully identified with being trans, especially while I was living stealth, mm-hmm. I have a different perception and standpoint on being transgender. And I was in the room with people who were talking about Caitlyn when she came out, and I had no idea I was trans. And for me, I was like, oh my God, like, if only they knew, like, if only they could see and treat me, how they treat me, other trans people. And so for most trans women, it's really a safety thing. I feel like it stems from, and being seen as the most themselves mm-hmm. and the most feminine, but it's not great. And I think it stems from ego and what culture has done to us.
Do you think Caitlyn Jenner is a good role model for the trans community?
Role model is a very interesting word.
I think I should say there was obviously an awareness that was probably, you know, shown a light on that didn't have, you know, it wasn't. I feel like it's become a much more popular is probably not the right word, just in the media, more prevalent than it had been before when she came out as trans.
What Caitlyn has done for the trans community, I feel we are all a little bit indebted to her, because there was Laverne Cox and Gigi Gorgeous and Amanda Lepore and Christine Jorgensen. There were trans celebrities. There were trans people working in Hollywood. But what Caitlyn Jenner did was open up the conversation of what it means to be transgender on a global level. An American hero is transgender, but the thing about role model is, yes, I think behind the scenes she donates money, and I think has changed her standpoint on Trump and Republican Party or Trumplicans, whatever. But the privilege is what's not what people can relate to. And that's, I think, the part of the problem of we see trans women as the stigmatized man in dress, transsexual cross-dresser. And Caitlyn, unfortunately, because of her age, hasn't transitioned like I have. And so many young people who are transitioning now. And so there's a stigmatized version. And I think that she did a lot for the community in opening it up on a public level and getting the media to really inspire people to become educated about it or pit people against it and still become interested in it. Like, that conversation came from Caitlyn and no one else. And I don't care what anyone says, like, I owe a lot of my journey to Caitlyn Jenner doing what she did. It was incredibly brave, and I appreciate what she's done for the trans community. But I think we need to start focusing more on the younger, happy, positive, hardworking transgender people like Laverne and Gigi Gorgeous and myself and Hunter Schafer from Euphoria and all the incredible actresses in Pose. Like, these are people who were not necessarily the most privileged. I mean, each people has a bit of privilege within themselves, but I think we need to start changing the narrative a little bit. And as much as I love what she's done, there's a lot that unfortunately, and it has nothing to do with her, like, she couldn't really help it, but like kept us othered and kept us ostracized and stigmatized. Whereas these new generations that I'm coming up with, I hope can showcase that we're beautiful and young and able to live positive, happy, successful lives.
It is that funny notion where, when Caitlyn came out, it was, she's so brave and she made this step, and that's great. And I love that people recognized her and that bravery. But I think correct me if I'm wrong, you don't want to be brave. Most of the trans community don't want to be brave. They just want to be recognized as who they identify with. And they
just want to be.
They just want to be. They just want to be humans. And I think that's the notion that most cisgendered people, or if someone's around you, they're like, wow, you came out as trans, like, you're so brave, and you're just like, I'm just what's your thought on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do get those comments and I don't get it. But then when I look at it from an outward perspective, it takes a lot to own your truth and live it out loud, regardless of your gender identity. And
when I had a kid, no one was like, wow, you're so brave, you had a child, that's amazing. And I'm like, this is just me doing my thing.
Yeah, and I think that, and like I said earlier, like, I've made it my career to answer those questions and be there, but I don't think it's every trans person's job to answer those questions. And I think the reason why people are so gung-ho about it or open to learning about it, like when they meet a trans person, is 80 or 82% of the population has never met a transgender person that they know of. They have all these questions. They've never met a trans person. They meet one, they become friends with them, and they want to ask. But trans people, most of them just want to be.
Right.
And I think that's where we have to start getting people to really, like we are doing with the Black Lives Matter movement, doing your own research, figuring out why the correct pronouns are so important and how damaging it can be when you don't say the right pronouns, or maybe not assuming pronouns.
Right.
Maybe cisgender people should start also saying he, him, his, they, them, she, her, hers in their pronouns, in their bios, in their LinkedIn, in their email sign-offs. I mean, if we're gonna have categories, then everyone's got to succumb to the categories and do their part, cis and trans and everything in between. And I think that that's where we need to start focusing on, and just like not assuming people's pronouns is incredibly helpful. And should our language lead more towards assuming they, them until we know what their preferred pronouns are. And that takes 0.2 seconds in the beginning of meeting someone. Hey, Corey, at this bar, what are your preferred pronouns? She, her, cool, done.
Yeah, that's something I would have to definitely, recondition myself to doing, because I'm so used to, and like you said, to your point though, 82% of people, that's a huge chunk of the population, have zero experience with it. That's why, going back to your point of representation in media is such an important thing. So it's not like the first time, you see people come up to some black person and say, let me touch your hair. Or someone comes up to you and says, oh, do you have a penis? Do you have a, it's just like, kind of, and that's why I kind of would go back to the handbook of like, okay, guys, like, let's not say this. This is kind of not what we're going with this, and having that, how to open up that respectful conversation, saying like, what are your preferred pronouns?
I think it comes down to education.
Sure.
In schools, not just at the college level, like middle school, high school. Let's get that health class to not be about deodorant and periods and like condoms. Like, let's get that health class to be about gender, sexuality, how to take care of yourself, mental health, how to be a person. I mean, it also would be nice if they taught us how to do our taxes and write a check.
Yeah, that should be, I am 100% business taught in school anymore.
Yeah, I think that the American education system needs a reboot, truly, honestly.
So how would you reboot it if you are in charge of the school system? Since you've become the spokesperson for the school district, you tell me, how do you re-educate?
Obviously, unisex bathrooms. I think that there should.
Why does that freak people out so much? It's insane because I think there's just also this weird perversion around, like, people think is like, oh, well, if this trans person's using this specific bathroom, they're gonna molest my child, or someone.
The opposite.
Right, and that's the thing. There's more creepy guys who go into guy bathroom. Yeah.
Totally. Remember the only time something like that happened to me, I was in Penn Station, and I was
already sketchy.
And I was in the middle of my transition, and I couldn't wait on the girls' bathroom line in Penn Station, so I ran into the boys' bathroom, and a guy looked at me, and I was like, what are you doing in here? Are you a boy? And I don't know what I said, but he just looked at me and he goes, oh. And like, he just understood in a second. And it was a little uncomfortable. And of course, like, I spent my whole life trying to get out of the boys' bathroom. So like, I was already uncomfortable, but it was like this weird place. It's like, why not have it? Like, what does it matter to you if there's another space for someone to go to the bathroom? Like, yeah, I get it if you're ignorant or uneducated, like male, female, but like at least a unisex bathroom, like, what's your problem? So I don't know.
Most of those bathrooms have stalls anyway, so it's not like anyone's like, you're not standing next to somebody, there's still
yeah, my mom asked me the other day, like, why do men have like pee next to each other? I also don't understand that.
There's a lot of men that probably wouldn't agree with that anyways, because it's just a weird thing.
It's weird, and like, me having to pee next to my high school crush was one of the most uncomfortable things ever, and I went to the stall. It was fucking worse. He was so hot, whatever. But yeah, I think in Corey High School, or Corey Land Education School System.
Corey U.
Yeah, Corey U.
To be Corey U. But
yeah, CMS, CHS, Corey U. I think that it would come down to an actual like health class where it discussed rape culture, not teaching women to worry about what they're wearing or their drinks at parties. I mean, yes, drinks at parties, sure, but like conditioning people not to rape instead of how to not get raped. Like, why don't you teach people who rape to not fucking rape? Like, what's the problem with like changing that narrative? So rape culture is extremely important. Mental health, that it's normal. Everyone's got a bit of something: anxiety, bipolar, depression, anything under the sun. Those are okay. Same thing with learning disabilities. ADHD, like these things, we have to normalize just like everyone being different. And that's what I would really teach in schools.
When you say rape culture, though, I know that that's a term that's is a super polarizing, strong term. Is it more about teaching men, especially, about consent and more of consent culture? I don't know that we're like, I wouldn't, speaking as the straight white male, is like, we're conditioned in a certain way to hypersexualize women. I don't know that we're conditioned to rape women, but I think there needs to definitely be more of a learning, and I don't know, that should come from parents and also school, of how to approach women. There was a meme going around that says, women, when you're out running, turn your headphones down. When you're doing this, doing that, like, but and there was like, the list was so long about what women should do to not get raped. And then the other side was like, hey guys, let's not fucking rape people. Like, how about that? Like,
and I think, yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think it's not to denote that women can rape sometimes, but let's focus on men for a second. Like, I think it comes down to men actually were conditioned that women were theirs and that women needed them for security and safety. You, after living with your parents at 17, 18 years old, need to find a man who can take care of you so that when he's off working, you can take care of his offspring. I think men have been conditioned, look at Trump, to think that women are theirs for the taking, to grab them by the pussy, to say whatever, to corner them in an office and kiss them. And then they say something about it, they're a fucking slut. Like, how dare you? It's disgusting. And I don't know how we got here, but I do believe that men grossly have been conditioned to think that women are theirs. Not necessarily to rape, but they were never taught about consent. They were taught that women are theirs for the taking and that they can have any woman in the world, and women pitting us against each other need to vie for a man because we need them to survive. And that's another thing relating to the first question about feminism. It's about like us having our own lives. And it's totally okay for women who don't want to have babies. And it's totally okay for women who do and need to rely on a man. I mean, I have my own thoughts on that, but like, I have girlfriends who have had 7 boyfriends.
Well, I want to hear I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Just like, why are you relying on a man? There's so much untapped potential, but sometimes people who aren't complete with themselves, who feel like they need a partner to be complete, like, that's just them. People who don't want to travel and want to get married and have babies and, you know, live in the valley, like, and that's their life, and don't feel like that's fine if that's what truly makes them happy. But like, for me as a woman, like, I am not going to be with a man until I am complete with myself. I am solid. I feel secure. I feel that I make myself happy. I feel like I have my own things going on. And like, women need to be empowered to feel like that, because I feel like there will be a lot more of those type of women as women feel that they can do that. And I would love to have a course like that as well, and teach about gender and sexuality and the history of us and put that into our schools. Like, why do I need 12 years of American history? Like, I don't care. Like, give me a couple and give me world history, and also give me like gender history, sexuality history, mental health history, rape. And like, I have never been raped, but I still am passionate about it. Have I been assaulted? Of course. I don't know one woman on planet Earth who has not been assaulted in one way or the other. But I was also conditioned to love it. I loved being catcalled. I think it also relates to transness in a way.
It made you feel more like a woman.
Yeah. But then I realized, like, it's disgusting, and I am so uncomfortable when, like, I can feel eyes on me when a person drives by on the street, or a man on the street, and they're looking, and like, I don't feel that I need to wear a bra or longer shorts for you, but it still makes me feel uncomfortable. And we have to get to a place where, like, you need to keep your fucking eyes on the road and not on this plump ass.
Speaking of that plump ass, you're obviously you're a very beautiful woman. You take care of yourself. What's your routine? Like, what's a day in the life of Corey Rae? You know, obviously you take very, very good care of yourself.
Thank you for noticing. Wake up. Grateful for that every morning. And I get up, I usually have coffee and or tea. And I sit down and I get through my emails and I figure out my schedule for the day. Sometimes I schedule myself the night before. And then after I eat, I'm vegan. So normally my breakfast is a shake or granola, blueberries.
So that's the only issue I have with you. You can be whoever you want, but you can't be.
I know.
I'm a chef, okay?
Like, I love everything on your Instagram, and then you post meat, and I'm like, Dina, come on. So, but you know, there's omnivores, there's herbivores, there's carnivores, I guess, if we're dinosaurs, but we're humans. I think we've evolved, but we'll talk about that in your next podcast.
No, I agree. We should all eat more vegetables. It's a social responsibility thing as well as a health thing. So I'm with you, but it's just, you know, it's like my straight male brain. I have to, you know, there's like, it's degrees. I'm learning. I'm slowly learning. So I want to have you here.
Yeah, like if you can do your part, 1 meal a day or 3 meals a week or something where you're doing your part, that is so instrumental. Composting or recycling, it all helps. But anyway, or reusing your clothes. Like, I reuse my clothes. Like, my friends, I know when they see this, they're gonna be like, Corey, that's the 25th time you wore that top in 5 days. And I'd be like,
And I still look great in it.
Thank you. I know it works. But then I eat, and then I do a circuit workout in my living room, which my friends used to always make fun of me from working out from home. And now joke's on them. And I do yoga, and I roll my body out, stretch, get in the shower, sit down for the day. And I really think and create and come up with ideas and write scripts and think about how I can get myself involved in the world. I think social media has been wonderful for me, but I have found in quarantine that I don't like writing my column as much. I don't like blogging as much. I don't like social media as much. Mm-hmm. And what I love and I'm so passionate about is I have missed, and I love modeling, and I do really like acting, and I love acting. And I think there's a potential to have a very successful career in that sense. Like, can't you imagine me coming out of the water, like hair wet as a Bond girl, or like something hot? And
that would be amazing. You'd be the first trans prom queen and the first trans Bond girl. I mean,
yeah, that'd be hot. I heard a report though that one Bond girl was actually trans and no one ever knew.
Really?
But happy to be the first openly transgender. That's the thing. Like, maybe there was a trans prom queen before that wasn't open about it. I don't know, and I hope to God that's not true.
We won't take it away from you. Don't worry.
Yeah. Knock on wood. But I think that like being in Hollywood and like Hunter Schafer does a phenomenal job at Euphoria, but it's a sadder story. Like, I think my niche is showing that I can be hot and fun and sexy and have a great fun role like that, or be in rom-coms, things like that. Like, that's what I've become really passionate about, and being on sets, and like that's what makes me most happy, and that's what I really have wanted to focus on now, and getting back to that theme like of screens. Like, I think I've conquered, in a sense, social media. I don't have the biggest following, and I'm really okay with that because I influence people on every day, and I'm happy with the people that come to me and the community that I've created for so many people who've needed it. And I've conquered the phone screen and hopefully a little bit of tablets. And I really want to get into the film and TV screens and really help people see us as just being humanized. And that I wasn't born a boy, and I wasn't born a girl. I was born transgender, and whatever that means to you, like, that's just who I am, and I can't be any other way. And so I hope that people can really start to understand that and accept it, and eventually love it.
I love it. I mean, I've been following you for a couple years now, and it's just it's been funny because we've kind of just been parallel following each other's journey. And when I sat down to do a podcast, I wanted to, I think that my whole goal was trying to find that common line of how are we, that we are more alike than we are different. And I think that's when you see politics, it's like all you're hearing are these left and right, and people are shouting. There's no one actually in the middle saying like, oh, how do you feel? I don't understand you. I'm obviously straight white male, which is probably the most hated person in America right now. But how can I be better? How can I encourage my friends to be better? How can we all just come to know someone else better and understand their story and find that middle ground? So for me, like, I'm interviewing people like yourself, interviewing mental health professionals that I'll have on, later in the pod to talk about, why are we so at odds with each other when the similarities really are very small, just as a human race.
Yeah, I think we don't talk openly. Like, we just haven't, again, been conditioned.
Well, I don't think we listen. That's the problem, is that it's not about even talking openly, because I think there's a lot of talking and shouting, but there's very little listening to your point of view.
Yeah, and I think to your point about what people can do to like help, in a sense, I think it's not only like supporting us, it's showing up for us, standing up for us, supporting us. Like, you see something about J.K. Rowling, like, that should just like offend you, and then you go on with your day, post about it. I don't care if you have one follower. That follower, first of all, you get 100% engagement rate, which is amazing. I wish I still had 100% engagement rate, because the more you grow, the harder it gets. But like, that one person's going to see it and like it and do something about it. I mean, I think it's about people really standing up for us now. Like, we've seen it with the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it's for show or not. Like, people are standing up and saying something and posting about it and losing followers and not caring. Like, you can't have Black Lives Matter without trans lives matter. So like, why aren't we just like standing up for trans people and like doing our part and doing the research on our own and watching documentaries and reading books and trying to discover about these people and then stand up for them when we see issues and make it something that we care about. Like, obviously I care about veganism and the environment, and I care about homelessness, and I care about, mental health. I care about all these things. And I also stand up for all those things. And I don't post about one thing. And I think you have probably seen that. Like, I'm always posting about different things. I'm never posting about one thing all the time, because we should care more. And I'm hoping that people will get on that train and just really start to support us more publicly.
I love that. So what is next for Corey Rae?
Oh, so much, I hope, and so much in the works. Of course, I think the most exciting thing for me is the film Queen, which is the feature film based on the story of me becoming the world's first openly transgender prom queen.
Amazing.
Really like that 90s take on a high school prom coming of age story, but with a transgender woman getting the crown.
my generation. That was the 90s.
Yes.
The She's All That generation. Is that what?
I love that movie. And also, like, hopefully a book, and continuing to do modeling with big brands. And
I saw you're doing a beauty campaign right now with Ipsy is the company.
Yes, and I was on a few billboards, which was very cool to like see the representation in LA and say, oh my God, like I've always wanted to be a big time model, and Corey can do that. Like, and it doesn't say trans model on the billboard, but people who follow me see that there's a billboard with me on it, and they go, oh my God, Corey went after their dream. I can do it too. And I think for me, what's next is continue to model and do bigger and better deals, and of course break into Hollywood and become an actress to change the perception of who we are in film and TV.
Yeah, I hope for one day that it's, there has been so many qualifiers for so many things, like, oh, this is my black friend, he's a black actor, this is a trans whatever. It's just like, okay, this woman's amazing in this role. Have you seen, and why not use the person's name? Oh, this is Corey, she's amazing in this film. That should be enough. So hopefully we can get to that one day. But speaking as an actor, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Inside the Actors Studio.
Yes, I have.
So James Lipton, the guy who hosted, has passed. So I'm kind of wanting to bring this back. There's a version of the questionnaire, the Proust questionnaire, which is 35 questions that I'm not going to ask you all 35. I just picked a few of them, just to kind of to see more about who you are as a woman and just as a person. So, and the first one's going to be mine, but it's kind of my version of the questionnaire. And it's what's something you learned about yourself in quarantine?
That I am most passionate about being a model and actress, and that I think my biggest takeaway is that we can all always be and do better. And that's what I've been working on, is like just becoming my best possible self. And I think everyone can always be and do better.
Amazing. Which historical figure do you identify with most?
That's interesting. In a sense, the first thing comes to mind, Christine Jorgensen. She was the 1950s, the first transgender celebrity. And she was very quick and witty, and when she was offended in an interview or something, she had a wonderful way of going about it. And I love that. And I see a lot of myself in that, I think.
Which trait do you deplore in others?
Lack of ambition and lack of self-awareness and self-education.
What is your greatest fear?
Not succeeding to my version of success. And sharks.
Fair enough. What is your most treasured possession?
My tiara from winning prom queen.
And last but not least, what is your motto?
I have a few. Confidence is key. This too shall pass, and it gets better.
And hopefully, I think ending on "it gets better" is perfect, because we are in the middle of such crazy times, socially, economically. Just the world is literally on fire. So hopefully, we will all get better. Corey Rae, thank you so much for taking the time to hang with me. It's been a long time. It's been a long time in the works. So
it really has. Social media friends to this. I love it.
I love it. Thank you so much. And we are definitely not going to be strangers after this.
I hope not. I hope to see you in person soon at some point.
Absolutely. That was the next thing I was going to say. So hopefully I'll either cook you dinner or we'll go out to dinner.
I love that more than anything. Okay, we'll talk soon.
All right. Have a good one.